You find yourself alone in a dimly lit room. The only light comes from a small desk lamp, casting long, trembling shadows on the walls. It's well past midnight, and outside, the world seems still. Yet, something in the air feels wrong. Nightmares begin not always with terror, but with something subtle, an uneasy hush, a lingering chill against your skin, the sense that you're not truly alone. Tonight, you will slip between reality and a place where the mind betrays you, where unseen presences roam the dark, and where waking feels like a dream, and dreaming feels like reality. In the next 90 minutes, you'll journey with Mara Langston, our protagonist, as she confronts the creeping horror of sleep paralysis, an affliction that steals her breaths, traps her body, and invites something sinister to stand at her bedside. This is not a simple ghost story, it is a descent into a waking nightmare. Should you feel your eyes grow heavy, remember, that is exactly where the danger lies. Resist the urge. Keep listening. Because while you listen to Mara's tale, you may find yourself drifting, and when you drift, so will the watchers. Brief musical interlude as narration fades. Mara Langston was not a superstitious person. A 28-year-old graduate student studying neuropsychology, she favored empirical evidence over urban legends. For her, nightmares were just the brain firing synapses in unfamiliar ways. Sleep paralysis was just a curious, if unsettling, byproduct of REM sleep. Tonight, however, she would learn that some things cannot be confined to textbooks. It began innocently enough. The day had been long, she'd sat in a stuffy lecture hall, graded papers, and later, spent hours hunched over microscopes in the lab. Exhaustion nudged at her as she trudged up the stairs to her apartment on the third floor of an aging brick building. In her small living room, the window creaked under a breeze coming in from the fire escape. Streetlights flickered below. Mara changed into pajamas, brushed her teeth, and slipped beneath the soft duvet. Her head sank into the pillow, and her thoughts drifted to tomorrow's experiments, mapping the neural pathways involved in sleep dreaming. Irony, she thought sleepily, that she was researching dreams while seeking a good night's rest. But sleep did not come easily. She lay awake, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant car horns. And then she noticed it, the lamp on her nightstand flickered, just once, long enough to catch her attention, then stabilized. She closed her eyes and willed herself to sleep. It was in that half-lucid state, when you're neither awake nor fully dreaming, that Mara's ordeal began. She felt a weight settle across her chest, as though someone had pressed themselves atop her. A low, scratching sound crawled up the wall beside her bed. Heart pounding, she opened her eyes and tried to sit up. Her mouth opened for a scream, but no sound emerged. Her arms and legs lay heavy, unresponsive, as if encased in concrete. And in the corner, where darkness pooled, she saw a shape, tall, slender, featureless, save for two pinpricks of dim red light that gleamed like coals. The thing leaned forward, its spindly fingers scraping the wall. Panic poured through her mind, but her body would not obey. Beneath her eyelids, the darkness seemed to pulse and breathe. She could not move. She could only watch as the shadow glided closer, its red eyes fixed on her. The room's temperature plummeted. She felt the thing's cold breath right at her face, and the floorboards next to her bed creaked as if it were shifting its position. Suddenly, a single, desperate thought flared in her mind: move. In that instant, her muscles cooperated. She ripped the duvet off her, sat upright, and gasped for air. But the corner was empty. The lamp still glowed without flicker. Still shaking, Mara gathered herself, turned over her pillow, and tried to calm her racing heart. Rational thoughts flickered, it must have been a hypnagogic hallucination. Sleep paralysis. Everyone says it happens. I'm fine. She forced her eyes shut again. Rest. Just sleep. When morning came, Mara's body ached from the night's terror. She splashed cold water on her face in the bathroom, staring at her reflection, as though expecting bloodshot eyes to remind her of the previous nightmare. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary. At breakfast, black coffee and toast, she scanned forum posts on sleep paralysis. She learned that many people reported seeing a shadow person, a tall man, or oppress of darkness, always accompanied by that awful inability to move. That was normal, she told herself. Normal, because she clung to normalcy like a lifeline. The day unfolded, classes, lectures, lab work. Her advisor asked about her weekend, and she brushed it off, forcing a tired smile. Long night, she said. Couldn't sleep. The advisor nodded sympathetically and moved on. But when night approached once more, anxiety tangled with exhaustion. She went to bed earlier, convinced that if she followed her sleep hygiene routine, no screens an hour earlier, chamomile tea, meditation, sleep paralysis would not happen again. And it didn't, at least not at first. She drifted into a deep sleep free of interruption until exactly 3:03 a.m. She awoke to the stink of something acrid, like burning plastic. The familiar weight pressed down. Her throat tightened. Her wrist hit something sticky, and she looked down, her palm lay on what looked like spilled ink. Or, blood. She gagged at the sight, but her mouth wouldn't form words. The lamp beside her flickered out. She was cast into pure blackness. In that moment, a hush settled so heavy that she could hear her own bones strain. From the dark corner, there came a soft, wheezing breath. It smelled like rot. The shadow emerged from the wall, a shape darker than darkness itself, fluid as oil, with crawling tendrils that reached across the floor. Its eyes were not red this time but pitch-black orbs that absorbed every flicker of light around them. Mara's heartbeat roared. She tried to jerk her legs free, but they lay numb. A cool draft curled around her ankles, as though the shadow's limbs extended through the floorboards. Then the thing spoke. Not in words, but a pressure in her mind, like someone scratching a message onto her very thoughts: "You cannot wake." Terror flooded her. She tried again to cry out. Her lips quivered. No sound. The creature tilted its head, as if studying her. Its voice echoed in her ears, "Stay." She felt it lean over her. She could feel the rasp of its breath on her forehead, foul and heavy. Its tendrils snaked onto her shoulders and slid down her arms, searing cold. She thought she might lose consciousness again, but with all her remaining will, she wrenched her right arm upward. This time, her muscle spasmed. She clawed at her own cheek, biting her lip until blood welled. The taste of copper jolted her awake. She leaped from her bed, lights blazing on. Her apartment was empty, no spilled blood, no foul smell, not even a flickering lamp. Just the ordinary creaks and hums of a cheap building at 2 in the morning. Heart hammering in her chest, she collapsed against the wall, trembling. In that moment, she believed two things. First, she was never going to sleep again. Second, nobody would ever believe how close she had come to something that lived in the spaces between sleeps. By Monday morning, Mara's eyes were haunted rings of exhaustion. In the neuropsych lab, she presented preliminary data on lucid dreaming, but her mind kept slipping back to 3:03 a.m. and the words that had formed in her skull. "Are you okay?" Her lab partner, Simon, asked after class. He peered at her, genuine concern in his green eyes. She forced a weak smile. "Yeah. Late night." He frowned. "You missed lunch yesterday. You look terrible." She waved him off. "Just chasing a deadline." Simon didn't push further, though his face betrayed skepticism. Mara spent lunch scanning academic papers on sleep paralysis. She noted that medical researchers had often treated the shadow figures as mere hallucinations, an interplay of the sleeping brain's parietal and occipital lobes. They attributed chest pressure to REM atonia sending mixed signals. She wrote notes. 60 to 80% of sleep paralysis sufferers experience hallucinations of an intruder or shadow. Common symptoms: inability to move, sense of presence, chest pressure, auditory hallucinations. Possible triggers: irregular sleep patterns, stress, anxiety. She bookmarked a study on how cultural beliefs shape the content of hallucinations. In Tibet, for instance, people speak of the yakshar, a vampiric demon; in Nigeria, the Ogun Oru, an invisible witch; in American folklore, the old hag. All point to a universal dread that seeps into the mind at the threshold between wakefulness and sleep. Mara scribbled in her lab notebook, must finish these revisions for Professor Hartsfield's paper, must stay on schedule. But sleep weighed on her. A dull ache pulsed behind her forehead. That night, she set her alarm for 6 a.m., intending to wake early and catch up on research. She fell asleep quickly, only to be shaken awake by that electric sensation of paralysis at 3:17 a.m. Something had shifted in her unconscious mind. She recognized the time instantly. The room was colder than before. The window was cracked open, but she was certain she had shut it. Her arms and legs were pinned. She tried to scream, only a dry croak emerged. And there, in the corner, was the figure again, taller, more corporeal than before. She noticed its head was slightly tilted, as if listening for her pulse. Its eyes glowed a dim, hungry yellow. For a moment, it simply stared. Then it raised an arm, long, skeletal, more shadow than flesh, and pointed at her. In that instant, Mara felt her bones creak, her lungs constrict. She tried to shake herself free, but panic clamped her mind in icy claws. Her vision blurred as tears welled. Then, just as before, she willed movement, twitching a finger, biting her tongue until the pain reached her brain. Muscle obedience at last. She sat up, gasping. But as she flicked on the light, she realized, her apartment door was ajar. Mara's heart hammered as she inched toward the front door of her tiny apartment. She had locked it before bed. Now it stood open, the latch hanging loose. She flicked on the hall light. Everything looked undisturbed, shoes in the corner, empty takeout boxes on the table, her laptop blinking in sleep mode. Maybe she'd left it unlocked in a daze. Ever since the first episode, her sleep-deprived mind had played tricks. She forced herself to breathe normally. She closed the door, locked it, and checked both deadbolts. Satisfied, she surveyed the room. No sign of intrusion. No muddy footprints, nothing missing. Yet, as she sat on the edge of her bed, she could still taste that metallic sting of fear from the dream. The memory of the creature's yellow eyes stared at her from the dark. She collapsed backward, sliding under her duvet. For a moment, she considered sleeping in Simon's apartment across the hall. But she hated imposing. She told herself she'd be fine. She drank a mug of tea, stared at the ceiling, and tried to meditate. Slowly, her eyelids drooped, and she drifted again. The first time, no warnings. No paralysis, just nothingness. She opened her eyes to utter black. In the darkness, glowing eyes. 2 pairs of them, one pair dull red, one pair yellow, hovered inches from her face. She realized she was floating above her bed. The room stretched beneath her like a broken puzzle. She tried to scream, but only saw her own mouth move in the black void. She drifted toward the ceiling. The watcher figures slid forward, their limbs lengthening. In that moment, Mara felt a pull at her ankles, as though someone, or something, below tugged her back toward her sleeping body. She gasped and woke in a cold sweat. Her body lay flat, paralyzed under the weight of a creeping dread. The watchers were there, perched at the edge of her bed, hunched like vultures. She closed her eyes, afraid to look. She tried to breathe. Focus. Think of science. Think of patterns. Sleep paralysis. Hallucination. Brainwave misfire. Center yourself. But the darkness closed in. She heard soft, scratching noises coming from the walls. Then, breathe. 1, 2, 3, she willed her fingers to move. They twitched. The watchers recoiled, and she jolted awake, ripping the sheets off her. Her phone lay on her nightstand, 4:02 a.m. She stared at the screen, mind racing. She called Simon's number. No answer. She texted him, came in. Seconds later, he texted back, in bed, sleep mode. Call me tomorrow. Mara slid off her bed, pacing. She examined her walls, no strange scratches, no marks. She realized then that each time she woke from these episodes, her apartment was immaculate, so immaculate, it felt sterile. No sign that something had been here, moving through her walls. The mental exhaustion threatened to topple her. She recalled reading that anxiety and fear fueled subsequent episodes, that the so-called fear-brain feedback loop made horrifying hallucinations more likely. If she could stay calm, lucid, maybe she could break the cycle. She took a deep breath and tried to reorganize her thoughts. She wrote in a journal. Episode 3. Time, 4:00 a.m. Hallucinations, 2 watchers, yellow eyes and red eyes. Float above bed. Partial levitation. Scratching from walls. Actions, awoke by willpower, once. She slept sitting upright in a chair in her living room, back propped by pillows, lights dim but on. Days passed. Mara's lectures suffered. Her research deadlines loomed. She tried meditating, breathing techniques, chamomile, melatonin, but each night, sleep offered no respite. On nights she avoided sleeping in her bed, her body seized at odd hours, in bus seats, in lecture halls, paralysis seizing her like a predator. One afternoon, she confided in Simon. Simon, I think, there's something not just psychological happening. I don't think it's mental anymore. He frowned, concern softening his face. Mara, have you ever considered seeing a doctor? A sleep specialist? She shook her head, exasperated. I've read every paper. They all say it's REM atonia, hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, nothing more. No one believes the things I see. He hesitated. What things? She described in hushed tones. The watchers, the whispery voices, the feeling that something wants to drag her away. Simon's eyes widened, but he didn't dismiss her. I've read about people calling these shadow people. They often feel an oppressive presence, sometimes violent, sometimes just observing. Mara felt a flicker of relief to have someone acknowledge her experience. Do you think you'd stay with me tonight? He nodded, determined. I have to present tomorrow, but I'll catch the red-eye bus. I'll be there. That night, Simon arrived with a VR headset. He'd downloaded an app that simulates a lucid dreaming environment designed to help people become aware they're dreaming. The idea, if Mara could become lucid inside her sleep paralysis, maybe she could transform the hallucination instead of merely terrifiedly enduring it. Stay calm, Simon whispered as he helped her put on the headset. Breathe deeply. If you feel the paralysis coming, focus on grabbing a detail, a scratch on the wall, a bead of sweat. And turn it into something else. Mara lay back on her bed, headset on, disposable earphones playing white noise mixed with subtle binaural beats. She closed her eyes. As sleep's threshold approached, her consciousness hovered between worlds. She felt it before she could even think, a tug at the base of her skull, a cold that slithered through her spine. She knew instantly, paralysis. Her arms and legs grew heavy. Usually, panic set in. But this time, she reminded herself of Simon's plan. Focus on a detail. Her attention fixed on a single dust mote floating in the darkness before her closed eyes, a pinpoint of light in pitch black. She willed the dust mote to become a star, then a small sun, then a glowing disk illuminating the walls of her mind. As the light spread, the pressure on her chest lessened. She forced herself to open her eyes. The watchers hovered, 4 figures now, each with different colored eyes, crimson, sulfur yellow, pale blue, and emerald green. They were arranged as if on guard at the corners of her bed. But instead of panic, Mara felt resolve. She focused on the watcher with pale blue eyes. The figure's shape wavered like a faulty hologram. She willed it into something she could name, a porcelain doll. She pictured a doll, white dress, glassy eyes turned kindly toward her. Her mental image crashed into the figure's shape. The doll-likeness flickered to life. The watcher's limbs condensed into painted wooden arms. Its face transformed into a porcelain mask with a tiny, sad smile. The blue-eyed watcher tilted its head, silent. The other 3 watchers regarded her with those glowing eyes, but they did not advance. Mara's mind felt electric. She forced herself to breathe, to stay calm. The whiteness of the doll glowed in the blackness. Soft light radiated from its form, illuminating the other watchers. They seemed less solid. Their outlines trembled. Emboldened, Mara imagined herself sitting up. Her body responded. She felt herself rising, still weighed by sleep paralysis, but less intensely. She pushed her legs down onto the mattress, and though wobbly, managed to sit up fully. The doll watcher drifted backward, turning to face the others. The colored eyes flared. She yanked off the VR headset, and sat upright, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. Simon exhaled, reaching to switch on the lamp. "You did it," he breathed. She stared at the empty corner of her room where the watchers had stood. The lamp's light chased away all shadows. Mara realized 2 things that night. These hallucinations, these watchers, were real enough to her mind to be shaped. Something about her fear gave them power. Each time she succumbed, they grew stronger. The next day, Mara felt a new sense of agency. That morning, she and Simon presented a poster on the neural correlates of lucid dreaming, ironically inspired by her own struggle. The room was filled with other grad students. Cameras flashed as Simon described how lucid techniques had therapeutic potential for PTSD and nightmare sufferers. Mara nodded along, every so often glancing at Simon with a grateful smile. But that night, sleep came stalking again. She lay beneath her duvet, listening to Simon's steady breathing on the couch where he'd insisted on sleeping. He refused to leave her alone. She felt safe, for now. She drifted. Recognized the tingle in her spine. Thought of the porcelain doll. Thought of the watchers. Then, the world flipped. She was aware of her bed but could not move. She found herself positioned in midair. She was floating. Beneath her, the room looked warped, walls bowed outward like the belly of a beast. The watchers multiplied. 2 more joined the corners, now 6 total, each with eyes burning, crimson, yellow, blue, emerald, violet, and pitch black. They just watched. No movement. No sound. But their presence felt alive, malicious, orchestrated. Mara felt herself plummet backward, toward the floor. But before she could land, a sudden screen of light burst between the watchers, as if someone had switched on stadium floodlights. She squinted upward. Standing at the foot of the bed was a woman. She wore an old-fashioned nightgown, hair pinned up like a Victorian-era lady, expression drawn in concern. "Don't be afraid," the woman whispered. "Remember who you are." Mara recognized the woman instantly. It was her grandmother, Eleanor Langston, though her grandmother had died years ago, long before Mara was 20. But there she stood, luminous and real. Mara's heart froze. Was this still a hallucination? The watchers hissed, recoiling from the woman as if she carried a shield of light. "Focus," her grandmother said. "You're stronger than they are." Mara tried to speak, her voice was lost in the void. The watchers bunched like a pack of wolves, eyes flaring. They pressed forward, and suddenly, Mara felt herself yanked from their midst. She landed in her bed with a gasp. She woke to Simon shaking her shoulder. Lamplight flooded the room. "Mara. You okay?" She looked around, confused. "Grandma," she whispered. Simon frowned. "No family ghosts in my house, remember?" She fought tears. The watchers were gone, but her grandmother's face lingered in her mind's eye. She called out to that image, but it faded. Mara realized how close she had come to losing herself, to letting the watchers drown her mind in darkness. But her grandmother's visit had shown her something. She could fight back not only with lucid visualization but with connection to her memory, to love. The following morning, Mara dug out old photo albums. She had not thought of her grandmother much in recent years, life's busy tide had carried her away. Yet seeing those yellowed photographs now felt like uncovering buried treasure. In one photo, Eleanor Langston stands in a parlor, wearing a plain cotton dress, clutching a leather-bound journal. Beneath the photo, scrawled in fading ink, E.L., October 1923. Mara's heart tapped in her chest. Why had her grandmother kept a journal? And why had her mother never mentioned it? She called her mother that evening. "Mama, did Grandma keep a diary?" Mara asked, studying the album's brittle pages. Her mother hesitated. "She did, long ago. It was about experiences she had in the house you lived in. You never told me." Mother sighed, voice tight. "She was afraid it would worry you. A lot happened in our family house. Strange things." "Like what?" Mara pressed. Mother's voice dropped. "When I was little, 5 or 6, I used to wake and see someone at the foot of my bed. She used to stroke my hair with cold fingers. I'd be frozen, unable to move, while this thing watched me. My own mother tried to comfort me, but she had her own episodes. Your grandmother believed our family was cursed with these watchers, these presences that feed on fear." Mara's blood ran cold. "A curse?" Mother cried softly. "I begged her to leave the house, but she refused. She said she had to find out why they came for us. Then she took her own life 3 years ago. She'd grown so afraid. I found her, she'd written in that journal that she couldn't fight them anymore." Mara sat back, mind reeling. Her grandmother's face from last night's lucid dream, the message to stay strong, felt so vivid. Now she understood, the watchers were generational. They had haunted her mother, and grandmother before that. "Mara, promise me you'll be careful," her mother said. "They live in fear. They try to keep you silent, when you fight, they feed on that conflict. But love weakens them, sometimes." Mara ended the call, tears blurring her vision. She hugged the journal close, fingers trembling. That night, she lay in bed, journal beside her. She traced her grandmother's cursive entries by lamplight. October 5, 1923. Last night, they came again. I dreamed I woke at 3:17, and there in the darkness they watched. Their eyes, blue as ice, glowed from the corner. I could not move. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I felt their breath on my skin, like the ghost of winter. I wept until dawn. November 2, 1923. I have read of the bold hag and the nightmare. But these are not folklore. They are real. They linger, slipping through cracks between sleeps. They feed on terror. I must find a way to banish them. Something in the Anglican liturgy speaks of binding spirits. I will try tomorrow. She read on, revelations unfolding. Her grandmother had sought remedies in scripture, in folk incantations, even in birch-root talismans. She described methodology, reciting Psalm 23 at 3:03 a.m., sprinkling salt in a circle around the bed, keeping a silver locket over the heart. But each attempt ended in failure, each page darker than the last. As Mara read, thunder rumbled outside. Rain spat against the window. She felt a tug at the edges of her awareness, an all-too-familiar heaviness. The lamp beside her flickered. Electricity danced in the wires. Paralysis washed over her in waves, creeping from toes to head. She tried to scream, but no sound. She felt herself pressed into the mattress. In the corner of the room, 2 glowing eyes appeared, crimson. The watchers had come. She willed clarity. She willed love. She remembered her grandmother's face, smiling with warmth, and her mother's gentle voice. She summoned them into her heart. The bedroom grew cold, but a small, steady glow spread outward from her chest. Her grandmother's silver locket, a gift passed down, lay warm on her nightstand. She visualized the watchers as frightened children, lost souls seeking comfort. You don't have to be afraid, she thought, picturing the locket's soft glow expanding. The crimson eyes dimmed. She forced her body to move, arm over her chest, fingers curling around the locket's chain. Suddenly, the watchers recoiled, their forms flickering like dying embers. Mara's mind screamed, and she yanked herself upright with all her strength. She flicked on the light. The watchers vanished. Shaking, but triumphant, Mara realized that this time, she had not merely banished them from her sleep, she had stared them down with love. In the days that followed, Mara researched everything about her grandmother's quest: archival documents, historical records, transcripts of spiritualist meetings. A pattern emerged: each generation of Langstons had experienced sleep paralysis at precisely 3:17 a.m., always accompanied by an unseen presence that sought to trap them in unconsciousness. Compelled by both scientific curiosity and personal urgency, Mara decided she needed to visit the Langston family's old country home, a sprawling Victorian manor by a lake, now abandoned, in rural Vermont. Her mother had sold it years ago, but the current owners, a reclusive couple, had allowed Mara a brief visit for sentimental reasons. On a cold autumn morning, Mara and Simon drove north. The air was crisp with the smell of pine. Road signs warned of deer crossings. As they crested a hill, the manor came into view. It was 3 stories high, lace-like gingerbread trim sagging, windows boarded. The lawn was overgrown with weeds. The lake beyond lay still, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. Simon parked by the cracked driveway. They approached the front door, which hung at an angle, paint peeling. Mara's heart thudded as she stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in the weak shafts of morning light. The foyer's grand chandelier lay smashed on the floor, crystals scattered like tears. "It's beautiful in a tragic way," Simon said, stepping over debris. Mara ran her fingers along a banister, noting claw marks gouged into the wood. She crept up the stairs. Each step groaned underfoot. On the second floor, a long hallway stretched endlessly, lined with doors. The wallpaper still bore floral patterns, though mold ate at the edges. She found the room where her grandmother had slept, a gilded bed frame, now stripped of linens, a bedside table holding tarnished silver candlesticks, and a small writing desk. On the desk lay a dusty portrait of Eleanor Langston. A stern, beautiful woman with high cheekbones and sorrowful eyes. Mara sat and placed the journal atop the desk. She opened the journal to the final entry. December 12, 1923. They came again, but this time. I touched them. I whispered a prayer, placed my palm on the cold floorboard. I felt them, behind the wall, hungry, whispering. But I refused to tremble. I told them, "You are nothing but shadows." They wailed, like the wind through the trees, and receded, for now. If I do not return from my walk tonight, know that I loved you all. I hope you are braver than I was. Below the entry, in shaky ink, the attic. Go to the attic. Mara went pale. The journal ended with an unfinished sentence. Her grandmother must have left the house that night, leaving only the journal's cryptic message. Did she climb into the attic? Had she found something worse? She rose and headed up the narrow stairs to the attic. Each step was draped in cobwebs. At the top, a low-ceiling space spanned the length of the house. Old trunks, broken furniture, and dusty antiques filled the room. Moonlight filtered through a small circular window. In the center lay a faded rug, patterned with strange symbols, a circle of runes, an 8-pointed star, interlocking vines. The sight sent a chill through Mara's spine. This was no ordinary attic, it was an altar of sorts. Simon flicked on his flashlight. Its beam caught on an antique mirror propped against a trunk. The glass was cracked in a jagged line, splitting the reflection into false angles. For a moment, Mara thought she saw a figure behind her in the reflection, her grandmother in her nightgown, only to turn and find empty air. She placed the journal down and knelt by the rug. The symbols matched those scribbled in the margins of Eleanor's entries. A ritual carpet, perhaps used to ward the Watchers. Mara traced a rune with her finger. It felt cool, as if holding a remnant of past energies. "Look at this," Mara whispered. Simon knelt beside her. This circle could be protective, but it also could be a beacon. A place where reality slips, maybe the boundary between this world and whatever lies behind sleep. They explored further. Against one wall stood a wooden vitrine displaying various oddments, a silver crucifix, dried herbs, a bundle of protective charms. Each item bore signs of hurried use, salt coating the bottom of the crucifix's stand, blackened at the edges. Mara realized something horrifying. Her grandmother must have performed rituals here, blood sacrifice, perhaps offering fear itself in hopes of quelling the Watchers. But in desperation, she failed, overwhelmed by the very forces she sought to banish. This attic was the epicenter of each Langston's nightmare. Outside, the wind howled. The house groaned as if settling, or perhaps breathing. Mara shivered. She felt a gaze, heavy and ominous, settled on her shoulders. She spun around, nothing. "Time to leave," she said, voice trembling. Simon nodded. "Let's go." They left the manor at a brisk pace. Mara's mind whirled. She needed to seal that attic, to bury the symbols, to break the cycle. But how? She had no instructions beyond her grandmother's cryptic notes, "You're braver than I was." Back at her apartment, Mara and Simon set to work. They photocopied every page of the journal, transcribed the runes, and sketched the attic's layout. Simon messaged a friend who studied folklore for input on these symbols. Tentatively, they began crafting their own ritual. Borrowing from multiple traditions, biblical psalms, Appalachian folk magic, and ancient runic inscriptions, they combined words of binding, white sage, protective circles, and silver-laced talismans. They would perform it in Mara's bedroom exactly at 3:17 a.m., the moment the Watchers seemed strongest. The goal, to transform her space from a battleground into a refuge. Mara paced throughout the day, anxiety coiling inside her. She grew nauseous with anticipation as night approached. She prepared her room, cleansed surfaces with salt water, placed protective crystals in the corners, burned sage. She arranged silver candle holders in a circle around her bed. Simon arrived at 2:30 a.m. with 2 audio recorders, one to document everything, the other as a backup. He checked her phone's time, 3:10 a.m. For the first time in days, Mara felt calm, focused. If she could do this once without panic, the Watchers might lose their power. She lay down, back in her own bed. Simon whispered, "Stay focused on love." "I will," Mara replied, voice firm. 2:59 a.m. The smartphone beeped in the corner, 3 o'clock. A chime from the recorder noted the timestamp. Mara closed her eyes. She felt her breath deepen. She chanted softly, reciting Psalm 23 under her breath. 3:05 a.m. She opened her eyes, seeing the candle flames dance. The recorder picked up the hush of her voice. Seconds dragged. She repeated ancient runes her grandmother had scrawled, picturing each symbol glowing white. 3:17 a.m. At that instant, the shadows gathered. The temperature in the room plummeted. The jade and silver talismans in the corners rattled softly, as if vibrating with unseen energy. Then, paralysis. Her limbs grew heavy. A breath of cold wind snaked around her ankles. She heard that low, mocking whisper, dozens of voices echoing from the walls, calling her name. Marh. Marh. Her heart pounded. She concentrated on the circle of candlelight, eyes fixed on a single flame flickering red. She repeated the runes again, louder. The Watchers surged at the edge of her vision, 6 figures, spectral, circling. Their eyes glowed in the dark, red, yellow, blue, green, violet, black, like bruises on the edges of reality. Her voice cracked. She felt tears pooling. But she summoned her grandmother's face, her mother's voice. She thought of love, childhood laughter in a sunlit kitchen. She imagined her mother's warm hugs. She poured all that into her chant. In that moment, the watchers lunged forward as one, shapeless arms reaching, jaws opening in silent screams. The wind twisted into a gale, blowing out the candles. The room plunged into darkness. For a heartbeat, Mara felt expected terror, the sweetest escape of surrender. But she refused. She forced her eyelids open. In the black, she saw a halo of light around her heart. It flared brighter than any candle. The watchers recoiled, keening like wounded beasts. She bellowed the last rune, her voice a roar in the void. The candlelight flared back into existence, illuminating the watchers so brightly that their forms fractured, dissolving like smoke in the wind. Then, they were gone. Mara collapsed back against her pillows. Paralysis fled. She jolted upright, gasping. The candle's circle blazed. The talismans glinted. Simon flicked on the lamp. He stared at her, awe wide in his eyes. "It worked," he whispered. She sank onto the bed, trembling with relief. She wrapped her arms around herself, focusing on each breath. The watchers had not just retreated, they had shattered. Morning light filtered through her window. Mara slept fitfully but peacefully for the first time in weeks. When she awoke, the clock read 7:22 a.m. She flexed her fingers, no heaviness. She rubbed her eyes, blinking away the remnants of dreams. Simon slept on the couch, his recorder resting on the coffee table. He stirred at her movement. "Morning," she whispered. He cracked a tired smile. "How do you feel?" "Alive." She hugged him. Later, she reviewed the recordings. The primary recorder had captured every whisper, every rattle of the talismans, every word of her chant. The backup device had everything, too. She listened to the final minute, just before 3:17 a.m., a rush of ambient noise, like wind in trees. Then her voice, reverberating with conviction. The whispering voices screamed, then, nothing. A single, sustained tone rang for a second, then absolute silence. She wept quietly as she listened. A chapter of her family's suffering had ended. The Watcher's timeline, almost a century long, had fractured at that moment. Whether they were destroyed or simply banished, Mara didn't know. But she felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from her soul. In the days that followed, sleep became a quiet friend, no more paralysis, no spectral visitors. Mara's lectures regained clarity, students asked questions, and she answered with renewed passion. In the lab, her research flourished. She wrote a paper on the psychophysiological effects of empowerment rituals in sleep paralysis, dedicating a section to her grandmother and mother. Simon co-authored it, crediting her courage. On the anniversary of that final ritual, exactly 1 month later, Mara returned to the old manor. With a donated crew, she photographed the attic, catalogued the relics, and sealed the ritual circle with fresh cement. The dusty runes no longer gleamed. The room felt neutral. No presence lurked. She took one last look at the portrait of Eleanor, still leaning against the wall. Mara smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I did it," she whispered. "Thank you." Then she turned and closed the attic door behind her, leaving the past in stasis. Mara Langston's story did not end with that final ritual. Though the Watchers never returned, her experience rippled outward, inspiring research on non-pharmacological treatments for sleep paralysis. She and Simon presented their findings at international conferences, offering hope to countless sufferers. In her dreams, she sometimes felt a gentle warmth at her bedside, a comforting presence, never fear, only the echo of her grandmother's love. She would open her eyes and smile into the dark, whispering, "I'm not afraid anymore." And so, as you sit in the hush of night, feeling your eyes grow heavy, know this: you are more powerful than the darkness. When you drift into that fragile space between waking life and dreams, carry with you the light of your own love, love for family, for friends, for the gentle pulse of breath in your chest. If the watchers come, two glowing eyes in the corner, a cold brush against your skin, remember Mara, and remember her grandmother's final words, "You are braver than I was." Close your eyes. Breathe. Let your love form a circle around you, stronger than any shadow. Sleep may come, but it will not break you.